Hello, everybody. How you doing? This is Brother Joe from Outcry Youth and Street Ministry in Detroit, Michigan, also known as Brother Joe's and Youth and Street Ministry. And I have a story to tell you today. And I did do this in kind of outline form, but I think I would be remiss if I did not tell everybody about the passing of a friend of mine and the effect that he and a few other men from the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 of America had on our ministry here in Detroit, Michigan. And I'm kind of trying to tell you the story from this last weekend at the funeral and the viewing and the funeral up to the place where I met Keith King. I'll tell you, initially I met Keith King down at the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 building in Detroit, Michigan, that used to be at the corner of Woodward Avenue and Temple Street in Detroit, which is right across the street now from the Little Caesars Arena and the business school that's setting on the corner. And it was the old Greenfields restaurant in Detroit on Woodward Avenue. If you're one of the old timers, you can remember that. I met Keith King at the invite of Bob Gillette from the American House. Bob Gillette is a Vietnam veteran, and for the over, I don't know what year they actually started, but from around 2010, 2011, Bob Gillette's been buying hot dogs. Their organization's been buying the American House organization's been buying hot dogs for our street ministry for homeless folks and for our youth and street ministry in downtown Detroit for decade or over a decade now. They've been buying these hot dogs, which is a huge money saver for us. And so Bob Gillette invited me to come down and meet with Keith King, and Keith was talking to him about trying to get an elevator or something put in the building. And Keith, Bob, Bob says, "I want you to see something, gentlemen." He took his cell phone, he clicked his phone off. I'm turning my phone off. So anyway, I went down there and I met with the two of those men, and Keith was kind of giving me a little bit of the evil eye. Evil eye. He didn't know me. Here's this religious guy coming in here, and what's your, he's meeting with Bob about a certain thing, and so he's wondering, why are you here, and kind of wondering about me. And long story short, Keith started talking to me about our outreach and what we do, and he says, "Man, that's really good. That's really good." Because I told him a lot of the folks that we feed on the street and a lot of the folks that we clothe down the street were veterans. And so, long story short, he said, "Well, how many times are you out every week? How many nights are you out?" And I got real honest with him. I said, "Well, about as many times as is humanly possible." And I was not joking. We would just run ourselves to ragged and then kind of fall out for a couple of days to get rested back up and get back at it. And he says, "I understand exactly what you're talking about." At the funeral this last week, in Keith's wife Dana was there, his son Jeff was there, and his daughter Amy were there. And I'm going to tell you about some of the things that these folks said about Keith and several other major um, friends and veterans that were there at this event, the funeral with Keith King. Miss Lisa and I did go up on Friday night to the viewing, and we saw family there and a few friends, and then I went back up there Saturday for the funeral itself, and then went to the procession to the graveyard there at the Whitechapel Cemetery in Troy. Uh, Jeff, who is Jeff King, who is Keith's son, said of his father, "He is an advocate, he was an entrepreneur, he was a decorated veteran and businessman. He was blunt, he was honest, and the thing that he was most proud of was his family," which that speaks volumes to me. I mean, advocate, entrepreneur, decorated veteran, businessman, blunt, honest, and the thing he was most proud of in this world was his own family. His daughter Amy got up and started talking about her dad, and I just really appreciated what both of the kids said. She said that Keith had raised um, them with this statement: "We have a job to do in this world. That don't be so self-absorbed. There's something that we need to get accomplished in this old world here." He said, "We have a job to do in this world." And she said that at ages 5 and 7, when her and her brother first went to the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 building, when they were first setting it up years ago, at ages 5 and 7, that Keith gave them jobs to do inside the building, cleaning up stuff, setting up stuff. And some of the other vets, man, they're just kids, let them go. And Keith said, "Oh no, I want to teach these kids some responsibility and that they need to take some ownership of some things." And so He had a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old kid in there doing some work inside the building, teaching them responsibility and respect for the property and being involved in all that kind of thing, which really spoke to my heart because the kids in our ministry, I used to say years ago with our youth street preaching group and everything, I used to say, we don't just minister to the kids, we use the kids and involve them in our ministry to help homeless people, to help the street crowd, the street girls, the drug addicts, and mental patients, and all of it. And so we directly involve these young people in ministry, which I really appreciate that because that same thing happened to me at the church I went to when I was growing up, both Stone Baptist Church, which later became the Rochester Hills Baptist Church. We were involved in teen soul winning. We were involved in street preaching. We were involved in a bunch of different stuff as you're growing up, which I really, really, really appreciate Keith and his emphasis to his own kids about they need to be involved. Something else that she said was that he had a mission, that her daddy had a mission. His mission was taking responsibility for veterans to helping people that couldn't help themselves and all this kind of thing. And he did a great job. He really did. Me being involved with him and seeing him work down there when he was the president of the Vietnam Vets Chapter 9. I am not a veteran myself. My own father was a World War II vet. Yeah, my daddy warned me and said, if you go into the military, I'm going to kill you myself. I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to be one of these tough guys and all this kind of stuff. My dad said, Joe, you have no clue what you're talking about. I heard Keith say the same thing. A lot of people get all gung-ho, but gung-ho kind of goes out the window when it becomes real combat and everything. All right, something else Amy said about her daddy. Number one, that he taught us we have a job to do. Number two, a 5 and 7-year-old boy and girl had jobs to do and taught responsibility. Number three, her daddy had a mission. Number four, he loved his veterans, and he did. He was bound and determined to do something for the Vietnam veterans, and later, the whole Vietnam veteran crowd did not want the next generation of veterans to be treated the way they were treated after Vietnam. Jack Devine, who was one of the members of the Vietnam Vets Chapter 9, was sitting next to me, and he got up and spoke for a minute. I also spoke after him. But Jack Devine got up there and said that when he first met King, he had just finished an interview someplace. I don't know if it was a radio program or if it was a television, and I don't have the call letters of the station, but this has been years ago, back about 1980, 81, something like that. And he said, here comes this great, Jack's about 5'7", 5'6". He says, here comes this great big man storming down the hall real quick saying, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And he finally says, who are you to tell me how I should feel as a Vietnam veteran? And Jack just kept saying, Keith, come to the meeting, come to the meeting, come to the meeting. And so they said Keith came to the meeting, and Jack kind of brought him in. And then Jack said, well, we just kept him after that. And Keith was a great big tall guy, big burly man. I'm a big boy. And could have been, he was intimidating to me, and I'm bigger than Jack Devine, and I can understand being that. I mean, he was a big guy, you know. And they said that about Keith is Keith took control of things. He'd think things through and get going on something, and I mean, he was like a bulldog, and he'd just get going and get things accomplished. Keith was also an author. He authored a book by a magazine called The Aftermath. It was a Vietnam veterans magazine, and he put it out to help veterans deal with the aftermath of the war. Now, you used to be in combat, and you used to be down there in the swamps of Vietnam or the highlands in Laos and Cambodia and all that stuff. Now you're back home. How do you deal with coming back to country? How do you deal with the world now that you're back? I think they call it country. That was actually when they were in country in Vietnam. But they said also about Keith that he was amazingly focused. I wish I had that problem, because I am not amazingly focused, and I need to work on that. I'm 64 years of age, and I'm still combating focus issues. I said in one of these videos, I read a book one time called Clutch, and they had a FDAP, which F, focus, discipline, adapt, and presence. And how do you deal with situations? You have to focus, you have to discipline yourself to get at it, you have to adapt to changing things, and then you have to be present. You have to get things going right now. You can't just keep kicking the can down the road. You got to TAN, take action now. You know what I mean? They said also that Keith was he was an MP, he was in military police, which kind of makes sense because he was used to telling veterans what to do and where to get off and when to shut up and all that kind of stuff. He had that kind of police presence about himself, and he was used to giving orders to people. And I enjoyed being around him. He was fun. All right, something else. Keith had been the president of the Vietnam Veterans of the state of Michigan. He was involved in dozens of different organizations, and he was the president of the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 Detroit when I first met him, when I first started going down there. They said also about Keith, and there were different people talking about him, but they said Keith was passionate. And when I think of passion, you can be disciplined, you can have goals, and you can have objectives, and you can have um, things that you want to attain and stuff like that. But passion, having passion about something, being passionate or having passion about something, is kind of the flavoring to the whole thing. It kind of makes it more fun and more enjoyable. And they said about Keith that he was passionate about veterans causes and all these other things. Right after I first met Keith King with Bob Gillette, Keith almost automatically started saying, "Brother Joe, how can I help you? What can I do?" He offered me, one thing he said is, "How often are you out on the streets?" I said that a little bit earlier, but I told him as much as humanly possible. Secondly, he offered our youth ministry. He said, "You can hold your youth meetings here in our building." I was stunned. A veteran, I mean, this big guy, this tough character, I mean, caring enough about our kids in the Cass Quarter in Southwest Detroit to us to come here in this building. I was afraid to tear that building up and get in trouble or anything like that. But he said, "Brother Joe, it's okay. You can come here and bring these kids and you can use our building." I was stunned. We never did that. And I wish I had. But we didn't take advantage of that like I should have. And he also told me one time, "You can store all your clothing in the basement of this building." And I really, really wish I'd have done that. And I'll explain that later. Something else. Uh, I had a question, lots of questions that I'd ask him. We had a board of directors in our ministry, Outcry Youth and Street Ministry Board of Directors. And I noticed that our board meetings and stuff like that were nothing like the board meetings at the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 at all. I mean, nothing like that. And they were much more articulate and much more business-like than ours was. Ours was a whole bunch of ideas, and let's throw it at Brother Joe here to get stuff done, things I didn't know how to get done, but I just had to. And most of that stuff I did get it done, but it just didn't pan out the way it was supposed to. Okay, something else here. I asked him a question one time, the same situation I'm talking about, and he kind of looked confused, and he kind of started scrunching up his face, and he actually got kind of almost like a disgusted look, and he says, "Who in the world told you that?" And he tried to explain to me, "Listen, dude, you're the president. You're the one that's supposed to be presiding, running this stuff, not this board telling you what to do. You're supposed to be telling them what to do," which I really, really liked that idea. And it's like things would have been totally different if they would have listened to the leadership, but instead of listening to the leadership, they were telling the leadership what to do. And that was a bad mistake on my part, and I was told legally that I could not do this and I could not do that, and it turns out I could have. So we could have had a totally different outcome with that board had we known what we were doing, but I didn't know, and neither did they really. Keith sent me an email one time when I started a thing I called Camp Wet Vet. Went out and bought Miss Lisa and I went out and bought a bunch of tents for the Vietnam or for the a bunch of homeless veterans who were down at Hart Plaza, down on the riverfront in Detroit, and they were living in the flat area on the grass and in the doorways and stuff in front of the Mariners Church. That's the same church that Gordon Lightfoot did that song about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It talks about the bell ringing 29 times for those men. Well, that's the same church where the bells ring 29 times. It's the Mariners Church. And there was a bunch of homeless guys living out there, and bunches of them were veterans. We went out and bought some tents, And I told the guys every morning, get up, pull up your tent, put it in your backpack, take off. Come back at night time, put it back up. Well, they did that for a couple of weeks. And Keith had called me or sent me an email and warned me. He said, Brother Joe, homeless people always get more aggressive, brother. You're going to have to watch this stuff. I'm telling you. And sure as shooting, what a nightmare. One of our guys, actually Mayor Mike Duggan, he was the former mayor of Detroit. Mayor Sheffield just became the mayor. Mike Duggan actually went across the street from his office, walked right straight across Jefferson, and asked Andrew, one of the guys, he overdosed and died since then. But he asked Andrew, he said, what's going on here and all this kind of stuff. And Andrew said, Mayor Duggan, do you have a plan for the homeless? And Mayor Duggan told Andrew, yes, I have a plan for the homeless. About 3 days later, the police showed up and tore that camp wet vet right out. It pulled it out like a bad tooth, And they all moved down the road to Lafayette Park on Jefferson, and that's where CJ got involved after Coleman Coates and James Hicks left. I said, CJ, that makes you the new president. And boy, did I create a Frankenstein. He took that to heart, or that he was the new, I'm sorry, I said, you're the new mayor. And he was, so I proclaimed him the mayor of Tinseltown, but that was kind of a in name only kind of thing. But he took it very seriously. And Camp Wet Vet became Tinseltown. And the next thing you know, it blew up and it was an international incident. Ay, what a mess. And Keith had told me it's going to happen. They're going to get more aggressive. Something else. I told Keith one day, I said, after I'd gotten more involved with the chapter, I'm sorry I didn't volunteer more when you were president on the campus. And he just kind of smiled at me and said, Brother Joe, well, you are now, aren't you? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, it's all good, man. It's all good. I didn't want him being mad for doing a bunch of stuff after he was no longer the president. I really was not very sure of myself. And that I have, the stuff I've been through has changed this old boy's personality here. I'll tell you for sure. I'm much more aggressive myself about things than what I used to be. Keith King and Mike Sand one day after the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 meeting on a Saturday came to me and said, Bro, Joe, we want to talk to you. And I thought, oh boy, what did I do now? I thought I was in trouble. And they pulled me aside and said, would you be our chaplain? And so I first showed up to try to honor the Vietnam veterans because of all the junk they went through after the war. And here, after we tore out the basement of that building and we painted the basement downstairs and we painted the upstairs room, had a church come down to help us, and a bunch of the kids from our ministry, the guy, some of them, they were adorable and they were dorks, so I called them the Adorkables, and they helped me tear stuff out, paint stuff up, and we did a ton of work. I mean, it was like that basement. We pulled about the fixings to build an entire house out of that basement. I mean, hard work, big fun, and I wanted to honor those old veterans, and here they turn around and bestowed an honor on me to be a veteran for a chaplain for that veterans organization. And Keith ought to always joke and say, I found Brother Joe out here roaming around on the streets, which pretty much was true. I got the invite from Bob Gillette, but I was busy out there with our youth ministry and our street ministry, and he invited me in, and so I did. And God knows I owe Keith King a bunch. One day Keith said to me, Brother Joe, the city of Detroit has taken my, I think they called it the Veterans Coalition. He said, they took my group away from me. He said, I started it and everything, and you could kind of tell it bugged him that even though he started it and he was the one that was going to the city and appealing to the city and trying to do work with veterans in the city, that, by the way, the Vietnam veterans were the ones that started the Michigan Veterans Foundation. Excellent organization down there. And they're getting all kinds of flack from the city too, as far as the way the city is growing, it's beautiful and it's changing, and so they're pressuring a lot of the shelters and missions and stuff. But Keith, it bugged Keith that he kind of got axed out of his own veterans organization he had going with the city, representing the veterans' causes. Keith King and Mike Sand, I have to tell you about a little bit of a story here. Back in October of 2013, We had our stuff stored in a building over here in Westland, and the top dog of the organization that we were renting from and dealing with, I called him up before Miss Lisa and I went down to street preach at Biketoberfest back in 2013. I said, "Now, brother, let me ask you a question. There's no way in the world while we're gone that this building's going to sell." And he said, "I know. Even if it sells, you'll have it." Famous last words. "You'll have at least a month," he said, to get your stuff out of there. Well, came back a couple weeks later, and I got the announcement on a Sunday that you have 5 days to move all your stuff out. That's everybody, not just us. That we had 5 days to get all this stuff um, moved out of our building, out of their building. And so you'll have at least a month becomes you have 5 days to get everything out. And so long story short, um, we were desperate beyond belief. I had what like a Walmart store full of clothing for the homeless, food items, hygiene items, medical items, all kinds. I mean, tons of stuff that we were squirreling away for winter weather. And right before winter, we get this mandate that you have to get everything out of here. Now, I messed up bad. I should have went straight to. I should have moved the stuff right straight across the street into a parking lot, but spent tons of money moving a bunch of stuff out to a friend of mine's farm way out in the country to save several of the vehicles so I wouldn't lose vehicles there again. And we gave all the clothing away to the Michigan, oh, not the Michigan Veterans Foundation, but the DAV, the Disabled American Veterans. And man, we went from having a ton of supplies for our homeless ministry on the streets of Detroit to having nothing. And just after we got, as we're still at the very end, I got of cleanup, I got a phone call from Pastor Adam Summers out in the Faith Baptist Church in Chelsea, Michigan, and that they had a ton of supplies that they bought from a veterans uh, a government surplus place out in, I think it was Kansas City, and they brought it back from Kansas City back here and put it in a garage out in Chelsea, Michigan, for our homeless outreach. And long story short, all of a sudden we have a brand new ton of stuff in it. I mean, it was a bunch, and we had no place to put it. I mean, we lost our building, we lost everything. We lost not our building, but the building that we were using, renting, and I was broken. I mean, I just literally thought, well, I guess I'm done. And so, long story short, I went down and talked to Michael Sand and Keith King, and I said I need a place to store a bunch of stuff. And I told them it's all government military surplus stuff. And Mike and Keith said we'll talk it over with the board. And sure shooting, this is where I get all emotional. A couple weeks later, they handed me a key to the building and the building code, and said, "Brother Joe, you can store your stuff here." And I'm telling you, we went from we had a ton of stuff till we had absolutely nothing, to all of a sudden we have a ton of stuff with no place to put it, till we had a ton of stuff and a place that we could start getting the stuff down here. And it was a few trips, but boy, we had boots that winter, and that would have been the winter of 2013 into November, December of 2013 into January, February, March of 2014. And man, it was so stinking cold, and we had all these supplies, and we had such a great ministry that winter. And Keith King, Michael Sand, the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 of America, literally saved our ministry's bacon. And I am so grateful that there was a man by the name of Keith King, and that for some reason that he cared about old brother Joe here, and I appreciate that. And we I went to the funeral the other day, and I did speak for just a moment. And it was not a religious based funeral service. I didn't preach or anything. I just got up and said, "Thank God for Keith King," and I told everybody this, a shorter version of the same story about how, for whatever reason, that day back in 2010, I came in that building, and he invited me in, and kind of our ministry started coming in there and being involved there, and really got super involved with them. And I have to tell the tail end of this story. I'm already at 25 minutes and 40 something seconds. But after I worked with Michael Sand, cleaning out the basement, painting the upstairs at the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 building in Detroit, Paul Polozzolo became the next president. Started doing some police officers appreciation dinners and luncheons, and then worked with Paul on several of them, and it became the first responders thing with Phil Harrison and stuff. And Phil Harrison kind of came in there and became one of the main workers there right after we had finished the tearing out the basement and painting upstairs. And Phil's a good guy, and we've worked together some. And Phil met a woman by the name of Donna Yost. And Donna was once voted Detroit's best dressed woman. And she is a beauty. And she just, the way she dresses just looks like a fashion model. And she's actually Canadian. She's living up in Canada again now. But for whatever reason, Paul Polozzolo, Phil brought Donna, and Paul told Donna about our ministry on the streets to kids and street people. And then Donna saw a video where I had a 2001 Dodge van and a 2001 Dodge pickup truck, and they both broke down at one time. And Donna told her husband, whose name is Kim, and she told her husband, and he said that they started talking, and they got together, and the Life Chest organization, which Donna and Kim had put together, and he told some of his friends, and she's told some of her friends, and the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 got involved in it. And they bought, back in 2016, they bought us a brand new, October 2016, they bought us a brand new Chevrolet panel van that I've replaced the brakes, the oil, and the tires, and I've had no major breakdowns with that thing in over 10 years. And it has just been such an amazing blessing. But I say all this, I don't know if we'd have been in the ministry had the Vietnam Vets Chapter 9 not stepped in and helped us. And I would have not had that van had it not been for Phil told Donna. Donna came to the building. Paul told Paul and Polozzolo, and Phil Harrison told Donna Yost about our ministry, who she told her husband, and then she told her friends, he told his friends. The Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 got to moving on at several of them, and we ended up getting the first brand new vehicle I ever owned in my life. And we've had that for 10 remarkable years of street ministry, and it's been so good. Anyway, I said all of this to say this. Thank God for the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9. Thank God for Mike Sand. This whole thing was basically about Keith King, who just recently passed away. I thank God for Keith King. I thank God for Michael Sand. I thank God for Paul Polozzolo. Thank God for Phil Harrison. Thank God for the Vietnam Veterans Chapter 9 Board of Directors. Thank God for Donna and Kim Yost. Love you all. Thank you so much. And I'm just glad that I met a man by the name of Keith King. And that man was good to this preacher here. All right. Love you all. Brother Joe, sign out. Bye now.